All right, yesterday we went through some of the comments Pat Narduzzi made about penalties and about the running game, and I offered my thoughts on those comments. I don't want to say I entirely tore them down or disagreed or criticized, but I had a few thoughts and a few reactions, and so we shared that. But there were a couple other things Pat Narduzzi said during his Monday press conference that I wanted to talk about. I thought I would get them all in yesterday's episode of the Morning Pitt, but just ran out of time. Just wasn't able to get it done. So I thought, all right, well, we'll do 2 on Tuesday. A 2 for Tuesday. That's like a good old radio bid, right? A radio bit, the 2 for Tuesday. And then we'll do 2 for Wednesday. That doesn't really work as well with the alliteration, but I mean, what are you going to do? So we got 2 more things that Pat Narduzzi talked about on Monday that I think we need to talk about now. One's about the offense, one's about the defense. We'll say that, and then we'll jump into it here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, I never know how much to give up there in the opening segment, the cold open, as they say in Hollyweird. I never know how much to give up there in the opening segment about what we're going to talk about, how much of a tease to get you sucked in. But I tend to think that most people who watch these videos, I mean, you guys just watch them every day. I think we have a pretty consistent audience here, and you're probably going to watch it no matter what I say in that opening segment, if you don't just skip over the whole thing right off the bat and try and jump ahead and guess where I'm going to stop advertising and asking you to like and subscribe and when I'll actually jump into the actual discussion and conversation. Well, that moment's not coming yet because I'm going to tell you that you need to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's where we put all of our video content here from Panther-Lair.com. We have our Morning Pitt videos like this one that we do every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Our weekly live show like the one we're doing tonight, me and Jim Hammett talk Pitt sports with you for an hour. We'll start that at 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And our live shows, the post-game shows that we do live after every Pitt game. We'll have that on Saturday after the Notre Dame game. We had a lively one after the Wake Forest game. We will certainly have a lively one after the Notre Dame game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Win or lose, it'll be one that you need to tune in for. And that's the best part about the live streams. If you haven't participated in one before, you tune in, and there's a chat screen. And so it's off to the right-hand side of your screen, and you get to be part of the conversation. You post your comments and your questions, and we respond to your comments and answer your questions, as many as we can over the course of an hour. We'll do that on the live stream tonight. Me and Jim will take your questions and your comments, and then we do that on the post-game show. I take your comments and questions, and that generates a lot of the really interesting conversation that we have. So join the discussion on our live streams right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, the website, Panther-Lair.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, so two more comments I wanted to run back from Pat Narduzzi's press conference on Monday. I think they're interesting conversation topics, things that I would probably be talking about anyway, but we're going to include Narduzzi's comments here just to kind of to tie it in so you can hear from him. I mean, I could sit here and read, Narduzzi's comments off the page. He said this and this and this, but you need to hear it from Pat Narduzzi himself, and that's what we'll give you an opportunity to do. So here's the first one. I forget exactly what the question was. The context almost doesn't matter because you'll hear in the answer what's relevant. And I want you to listen to this comment, and then I'll tell you what I think is relevant about it and what it means for not just this season, but the entirety of the Pat Narduzzi era.
I think it's easier to get beat by 25 points than to take that one on the end when you think you have a chance. But again, and you still didn't play good. Like, I still look at it and go, the end of the game doesn't even matter. I'm still pissed about the first quarter, the second quarter, and third quarter with the things we didn't do. And again, it comes down to execution. It's a game of execution. And it comes down to consistency. You can't show me you can do it really good here and then you can't do it here. That drives me nuts.
So that's a nice little 30-second segment there, 26 seconds or whatever it ended up being. And like, I included that whole quote because I wanted you to hear all of it and just hear the full quote that came from Narduzzi. But there's one section in there in particular that really got me, and it was right in the middle. Not about how it's better to get beat by 25 than to lose close. Not about how, execution and it drives me nuts. It's when he said, and I quote, now we're going to use a bad word, and I should have told you earmuffs before I played that quote because he had a bad word in there. And we're going to use that bad word too. He said, I'm still pissed about the first quarter and the second quarter and the third quarter. And that ties in to something that I have talked about since that game, that I talked about on Saturday night in the postgame show. I talked about in the Morning Pit each of the last 2 days, I believe. I wrote 10 long thoughts on Panther-Lair.com that I published on Monday morning. We talked about it on the message boards all over the place of where this game was lost. And how no matter how many times you want to talk about the defense and a third-string quarterback, and they gave up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and they let a third-string quarterback beat them, and all this different stuff. They let a guy who's only played 6 snaps beat them, and everything like that. And I understand that, and there's some truth to it. The reality is that game was lost by the offense, because when Pat Narduzzi says he's still pissed about the first quarter and the second quarter and the third quarter, the defense only gave up 1 touchdown in those 3 quarters. So he's not mad about that. He's not calling out the defense when he says, I'm still pissed about the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. He's not calling out the defense. It's not about defense. That's about the offense. The offense that was only able to score 1 touchdown in the first 3 quarters. The offense that went 10 drives between touchdown drives. Had a great touchdown drive at the beginning of the game and a great touchdown drive at the end of the game. And in between had 10 possessions where they generated a grand total of 3 points. And you're probably like, dude, shut up. I'm tired of hearing about this. You've talked about this every day. You talked about it on Saturday. You talked about it on Monday. You probably talked about it yesterday. I don't remember. Stop saying about these 10 drives that only generated 3 points. I will. I won't. I'm going to keep mentioning it. But I'll tell you right now, just to, alleviate your concerns, I'll pretend like I won't bring it up again. But I think it's important to hammer on that point. I think it's important to understand, again, that this game, no matter what happened against Santino Marucci at the end of the game, this one was lost by offense. It was lost by the offense failing to extend the lead. It was lost by the offense failing to put pressure on Santino Marucci. We talk about the pass rush and getting pressure on the quarterback. Guess who could have put pressure on the quarterback in that game? Pitt's offense. By scoring a couple touchdowns and making his first start, the kid who's only played 6 snaps prior in his career, making him feel like he had to win the game. He never felt like he had to win the game until the very final drive of the game. If you put him under that kind of pressure for the entirety of the second half, he doesn't respond like that. He makes more mistakes. He throws more interceptions. You keep scoring, and even if they score 3 touchdowns, even if they end up with 21 points, it's okay because you've got 35 or 38 points. What made Pat Narduzzi mad in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter? It was offense. It was the lack of offense. And here's the trick. Here's the thing. And here's where we're going to expand it out to a different conversation. It's the same conversation, actually. It's just a broader conversation. And it's not necessarily anything new. I'm going to say this, and you're going to be like, well, yeah, we've all been saying that on the message board for years. If there is one side of the ball that has been a decided liability more often than the other, if there's one side of the ball that has defined seasons by its liability and ineffectiveness, if there's one side of the ball that has cost this team more than the other, under Pat Narduzzi, it's the offense. When you think back over 8 seasons plus 7 games of Pitt football under Pat Narduzzi, how many seasons, looking at a whole season, would you say, well, the outcome was drastically changed because one side of the ball was a liability? Now, if we say defense, in 2016, I think 2016, you look at it, they lost to Oklahoma State, North Carolina, Miami, and Virginia Tech. And I would say at least 2 of those games, you can say absolutely the defense lost them that game. The offense played well enough to win. Even though at the time after the North Carolina game, I remember spending a lot of time talking about how the offense had an opportunity to win that game late and they failed to do so. But the reality is they played well enough to win. The defense blew that one. And the same thing in the Virginia Tech game. Offense could have done better for sure, but they scored 33 points. You needed something approaching an effective defense. And that right there is the difference between 8-5 and 10-3. All right, that's a 10-win team. It's a 10-win season lost because of how bad the defense was. That was a year where you would say the defense was a liability that cost the team games. Was the difference between 8 wins and 10 wins. So that's one. How many seasons would you look at and say that the offense was the difference between 8 wins and 10 wins, or 7 and 9, or however many you want to look at? How many years would you look at and you would say the offense was the liability that cost the team a better record, a better opportunity? Because I got a bunch. I got 2019 when they lost to Boston College and Miami. And they scored, I think, in the teens in both games. I think they scored 12 points against Miami, 19 against Boston College. You're not going to win like that. And that's the difference between going 7-5 in the regular season and going 9-3 in the regular season. That's the difference between playing in Detroit and playing, make fun of El Paso all you want, but it's the Sun Bowl. It's a bigger bowl. It's a better bowl than a Big Three Motor Company Pizza Bowl or whatever it is. I would say the offense cost them that year. I would say last year, the offense cost them wins against Georgia Tech and Louisville. The offense was the liability last year that cost them wins in those games. And that's the difference between a 9-win regular season and a 7-win regular season. They go they went 8-4, excuse me. So that's the difference between 8-4 and 10-2. You win those two games and you go to Charlotte. You were in the conversation at the very least. Over the course of 8 seasons, Pitt won the Coastal Division or and advanced to the ACC championship game twice. At least 2 other times they should have been in the conversation and in the competition down to the wire, 2019 and 2022. If not for the offense. The offense kept them out of those situations. Now the defense did it in 2016. No, you'll get no complaint from me. You'll get no argument from me about that. The defense was the problem there. 2015, I think that team found its level at 8-5. I think that was who they were, and I think that's about right. 2017, I think that team largely found its level. They probably should have been a 6-6 team, but 5-7, 6-6, that's about where they belonged. 2018, all right, they finished 7-7. Now, I'll give them the 7-5 record in the regular season. I think that's about who they should be, but they scored 3 points against Miami in the regular season finale. And they scored 13 against Stanford in the Sun Bowl. Do we feel differently about that team if they're 9-5 as opposed to 7-7? 9-5 Coastal champions, 7-7 Coastal champions. That's a big difference. 2020, it's such a weird year. I mean, I think that team was more or less where they should have been record-wise and performance-wise. 2021, obviously the offense was a major asset, and the defense played really well too. 2022, they should have been in the hunt. They should have been in the hunt for the ACC. They should have been in the hunt for an appearance in Charlotte. They should have been in the hunt for 9 wins in the regular season without really doing too much more than just scoring some points against Georgia Tech and Louisville. Offense cost them those games and cost them a better season. And now here we are in 2023, another one we will add, another notch on that ignominious belt, where the team is 2-5. And I would say, I mean, Cincinnati, you want to say, okay, they gave up a lot of rushing yards in the first half, but they cleaned that up and did a good job against Cincinnati in the second half, and offense was terrible. West Virginia, they lose the game by scoring 6 points. Defense definitely didn't lose that one. They gave up 17. North Carolina, whatever, you're going to lose that game. That's fine. Virginia Tech, defense didn't play well, but maybe the outcome is a little bit different if the offense could actually stay on the field for some amount of time and score and put a little more pressure on Virginia Tech. Louisville, they win, and I think both sides of the ball did their part there, although the defense certainly by pitching a shutout and scoring 7 points in the second half had a lot to do with it. And then the offense lost this game against Wake Forest. So I mean, you're looking at another season, and wherever this season ends up, it ends up at 4-8. If they somehow rally to go 5-7 or something like that, they're always going to be at least, in my view, at least 3 wins that were just left on the table by bad offense. Just left on the table. And you can pick which 3 there are. I think Wake Forest definitely. I think West Virginia definitely. If you want to pick Virginia Tech or Cincinnati, I won't even be so greedy as to say you take both, that they left 4 wins on the table. Let's say that they just 3. And so instead of being 2-5 right now, they'd be 5-2. And maybe they wouldn't have any impressive wins. They wouldn't look all that great. It wouldn't be anything special. But just by having a modicum, just by having a little bit of effective offense, average offense, they're a 5-win team. They're 5-2 right now, as opposed to 2-5. And when they get to the end of the season, instead of being 4-8, they're 7-5. Or instead of being 5-7, they're 8-4 or something like that. They don't need to be. It doesn't need to be. Some crazy advancements, in offense. They just needed to be average. But the offense has been such a liability. that it has cost them. And so now we're looking at how many seasons now, like that I'm putting on this list of like 18, 19, 22, 23, half of Narduzzi's years have been sunk by bad offense. And I'm not breaking any news to Pitt fans who have followed this program for the last 8 or 9 years. They know that offense has been the biggest problem. But it becomes a question of, can you actually fix this? And there are ways to fix it, maybe not over the course of a season, but certainly in the course of an offseason. But do you have the wherewithal to actually do it? Do you have the wherewithal to actually accomplish it? We'll see. We will see. All right, flip over to defense. There was something Pat Narduzzi said, talking about Jordan Bass, freshman linebacker who got his first career start, ended up playing like a ton of snaps, 50-some snaps, in the game at Wake Forest on Saturday. And Narduzzi talked about him and talked about something else that I want to get into. It's one other sort of lingering topic from the Wake Forest game that I think is relevant and then leads into a bigger discussion as well. So here's Pat Narduzzi after he was asked about the play of Jordan Bass in the game at Wake Forest on Saturday.
I tell you what, Jordan Bass for a freshman in base defense, and I didn't really realize, when you think about how your third down package. We weren't very good on third down, and poor Jordan Bass is starting on that team too. I didn't take into account the effect there, but we had a lot of walkthroughs in fall camp. There wasn't one walkthrough that Jordan Bass spent in third down at all, because it's like, that's way too much. Let's just get you to be good with your base defense. But Jordan Bass played well. I was impressed with him for his first game. He's only going to get better. We got to get Miles going this week as well, I think. But Jordan Bass, for playing 4 plays last week on defense, and then having 51 plays on defense, it's way too many. But that's kind of what we were under, and it cost us at the end of the game too. It wasn't necessarily his fault, but I would have hoped we would have adjusted a little bit better what we did. But play with young guys. Sometimes they're not going to be perfect. They're not even close to perfect. Our guys that played 4 or 5 years are perfect. But I was impressed with the way Jordan Bass played, pulled the trigger, and made plays.
All right, good stuff from Pat Narduzzi there about Jordan Bass, and I thought it was pretty encouraging and pretty positive. And I think Bass, he was flying around. I'm sure he made mistakes. The coaches would know that better than I did, but he was flying around. He looked explosive. I think all the physical tools we expected to see out of Jordan Bass were right there, and we could see them on display. And I think he did a good job with that. But there was something in there, and Charlie Partridge said this yesterday as well. We asked him about he was asked about the Jordan Bass situation, and he about how Bass played, because they bring out one coach from each side of the ball each week, and it just happened to be Charlie Partridge this week. So even though you're not the linebackers coach, guess what? You get to answer about linebackers. And Charlie said that they probably should have adjusted some of their calls based on the fact that they had a freshman playing as many snaps as he did for the first time. And here's the thing, and this is Law and Order's ripped from the headlines. This is ripped from the message board, a discussion that we're having there, and we've had since the game. Jordan Bass played as much as he did because Solomon DeShields got hurt. Solomon DeShields got hurt on a kick coverage after Pitt's game-opening touchdown. Here's the thing. You never predict injuries. You never can account for injuries. You never know when an injury is going to strike. That's impossible to guess at, and I understand that. But they knew when they flew to Wake Forest, when they flew to Winston-Salem, they knew that 2 guys were not on that plane, Kyle Lewis and Braylon Lovelace. And those 2 were the top backup outside linebackers, particularly at that star linebacker position. Those 2 guys were not going to be on the trip. They knew they were not going to be on the trip, which meant because of that, the top reserve star linebacker behind Solomon DeShields was going to be Jordan Bass. And he played 4 snaps against Louisville. They said, well, they probably expected to get him 20 or fewer snaps against Wake Forest because Solomon DeShields is there. But if you know you're in that situation, you know that you have just this one guy, that your top reserves didn't make the trip, and that your top reserve is now a freshman, don't put him in any unnecessary harm. Don't take unnecessary risks. Don't put Solomon DeShields on the kick coverage team. Hindsight is 20/20. You can't predict injuries, but given how many plays are touchbacks, and that one wasn't, but given how many plays go for touchbacks anyway, And given the lack of depth at that position, you put yourself in a position to have Jordan Bass playing all those snaps, and he ends up on third down. And Pat Narduzzi's talking about, he's got very minimal experience practicing third down and learning the third down package. Then that increases the need to make sure you protect Solomon DeShields at all costs. Putting him on the kick coverage unit accomplished nothing other than taking him out of the game. And hopefully it's only for that one game. We'll see what his availability is like going into the Notre Dame game, but that's all you accomplished, was you knocked Solomon DeShields out of the game and forced Jordan Bass into action. Now, I think Bass will ultimately be better for it. I think that's all going to end up being, I think that'll be a positive for the future, but it certainly didn't help you against Wake Forest. And Pat Narduzzi seemed to say there that there were key plays that Jordan Bass made mistakes on, which is understandable. He's a freshman playing for the first time. And we're not holding anything against him. I mean, I think it's tough to walk on the field as a freshman at linebacker. But you kind of created that situation by taking an unnecessary risk with Solomon DeShields. And I was going to extend this out to talk about the defense and the youth and all that. And maybe we'll do that on tomorrow's Morning Pitt because we're running short on time. But you got to have some better planning than that. And you have to adjust. And it's not like you got down there and Lovelace and Lewis were hurt and couldn't play. They didn't even make the trip. You knew you weren't going down there. You didn't have a plane ticket for them. So you needed to know that Solomon DeShields is pretty much your only star linebacker, the only guy who's had any experience. And so you better get him, you better keep him protected. Not on defense, but he definitely doesn't need to be working on the kick coverage unit. So positive stuff overall for Jordan Bass. I think his future is really bright. I think he's going to be really good. He'll make some good plays for this team this year. But they put themselves in a tough spot, and they put Jordan Bass in a tough spot by taking that risk with Solomon DeShields. If they go into this game at Notre Dame and Lovelace or Lewis are still not available, if DeShields is back, or even if DeShields is not back and Lovelace is the only guy or Lewis is the only guy, don't put him on special teams. You can find someone else who can cover a kick. You got a lot of safeties. You got a lot of DBs. Put those guys out there. You might even have other linebackers. I don't know. Just don't take those risks with your key guys. All right, like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all of the Pitt sports news. Thanks to you for tuning in today. Don't forget the live show tonight here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss that. We'll have lots of Pitt conversation, me and Jim Hammett and you here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you've had a great week so far. It's hump day, right? We're moving past the middle of the week, heading toward the weekend in Pitt at Notre Dame. Looking forward to that. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you soon tomorrow. Well, we'll talk to you tonight on the live stream and then tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.